You once again welcome to this channel. I'll be continuing on the series on the domain one of Cisa. So today we are starting the Cisa domain one part 3. I hope you've looked at part 1 and part 2 we've done so far. Okay, but today we are continuing with part 3 of Cisa domain 1. Okay, so today we'll be looking at audit programs. Okay, so basically, what is an audit program? An audit program is what is used by the auditor to detail what needs to be done, right? The objectives of the audit and what needs to be done to achieve the objectives of the audit. Okay, so we want to do a BCMS audit, for example, business continuity management system audit, disaster recovery audit, right? I may want to use perhaps a standard like ISO 22301 as an audit criteria for me to be able to decide the audit questionnaires or the audit procedures I am going to use as checklists. I want to perform my SMS audit, information security management system. I want to look at ISO 27001 or ISO 27002, the control checklist, all right, to build an audit program. Okay, so basically an audit program is a step-by-step set of audit procedures and instructions that we perform in order to complete an audit and achieve audit objectives. So the audit program is very important as part of the audit process, and the audit program should be retained as evidence of work done at the end of the audit. So basically, like you've been saying from phase 1 or the stage first video of domain 1 of Cisa. All right, so audit basically has a planning phase, which for me is very, very important. Remember, I said it, and I said basically the planning phase is more of information gathering, trying to familiarize yourself with the audit area so that you'll be able to apply risk-based judgment. Okay. So for the planning phase, we need to know the audit subjects, we need to determine the audit objectives, we need to determine the audit scope, we need to perform pre-audit planning, all right, determine areas have various risks, all right, document the audit area and so on. Then we determine procedures. So if we are able to do all this, we are able to plan the audit, then we can move to the field. Okay, where we basically what we are doing is we are acquiring data, all right, we are acquiring data based on inquiry, based on audit tests. Okay, so with test controls, we issue discovery and validation. Then, of course, we document our result. Then from there, we can move to the reporting page where we gather reports requirements. That is, the people we are reporting to, what do they want? All right, what are the legal requirements? What are the regulatory requirements? What are the business requirements? What are the stakeholder requirements for the reports? All right, then we draft the reports. Then we issue the report. Then, of course, like I said in the first video, you have to follow up to confirm that your recommendations have been executed. And of course, we also need to keep records of audit working papers. All right, everything that was done. So your audit program is part of your audit working papers. All right, the result of audit tests, the audit tests carried out, okay, people interviewed, and so on. Standing working papers, recurrent working papers, right, or current working papers. So if it is, for example, it is a recurrent audit, so you have some working papers from the past audits you have carried out. So all these will be piled up over time so that we can have a picture of everything that the auditor has done as regards that audit area. So working papers are very important. In case of auditor's liability, you get sued for negligence, somebody complained you didn't do enough. Your audit working papers are your defense, are your security to convince any stakeholder, anybody making inquiry that you have done what needs to be done. All right, let's move to compliance test or transit test. So basically, like the name is, compliance test is basically used for testing compliance, conformity with legal requirements, conformity with internal policies, right? Are controls, are they working as designed by management? That is the essence of compliance tests. Substantive tests are used to test details, transactions, balances, right? So we have account receivable balance of $500,000 in the books, right? If we test such documents, right? If we test from the ledger to the various customers, can we be able to validate that $500,000? All right, or if we circularize, as I say in the financial audit, we write those customers, get more information, independent information from the customers allegedly owing the business. All right, so basically, substantive test is used to confirm whether balances and transactions are valid, accurate, or not. Okay, so there's a relationship between compliance and substantive tests. All right, the result of compliance test determines the extent of substantive test. All right, so if the auditor performs compliance test and is all good, all right, the organization is found to be high ranking in terms of conformity, all right, to internal and external procedures, then most likely than not, we are going to reduce the extent of substantive tests. But if they fail compliance tests, what that means is that you have to increase substantive testing. That is very, very important. Okay, so let's go to sampling. Sampling simply means you don't do 100% testing. So you test less than 100% of the population. Now, once you do that, it creates a risk that is called sampling risk. So sampling risk is a risk that the sample chosen is not really reflective of the population. And that's a very big risk. So sampling risk can lead to detection risk, and detection risk can lead to audit risk. So which means at the end of the day, the audit may actually fail because the auditor chose the wrong sample. All right, so we have two general approaches to audit sampling. You have statistical sampling, and then you have judgmental sampling. So statistical sampling basically means we are using the laws of statistics, the laws of probability to determine the sample size, to determine the sample selection criteria, and the rest, which introduces objectivity into the sampling process. All right. So the other approach is to use judgment of non-statistical sampling, where the auditor just use perception, experience to determine the sample size or the sampling criteria. And of course, this is quite subjective, right? So this might increase sampling risk if you are using judgmental sampling. Now let's look at method of sampling. Method of sampling are basically two. All right, we have attribute sampling in Cisa. We have variable sampling also. Attribute sampling, just like the name, all right? Attributes is characteristic, right? So in attribute sampling, we are going to use the characteristics of the population of the sample to decide what to select. Okay, so for example, now I'm looking for access control forms that have authorized signatures. So the attributes, the characteristic I'm looking for is authorized signature. So in attribute sampling, basically we are looking for the presence or absence of a characteristic. And because of that, we use attribute sampling for compliance testing, right? So we want to know whether what is required to be present or absent, like is there or not. Okay, so there are three types of attribute sampling. You have frequency estimating sampling, you have stop or go sampling, you have discovery sampling. All right, so frequency estimating sampling basically is used to look for a particular attribute, like the example I just gave now. All right, so from the January to date, how many people have joined the organization? So let's assume we recruited 10 people, HR recruited 10 people. Those guys were created in the core business application. Then the IS auditor can request for the user access forms that were used to create those 10 guys. Now, what is the auditor looking for? or the access form. The auditor is looking for the approval signatures. Okay, perhaps in our organization, policy says the supervisor of the guy should sign, HR should sign, internal control should sign, 3 signatures. So the auditor is looking for those 3 signatures, those attributes, those characteristics on the 10 forms. All right, so maybe out of the 10, just 8 has the complete authorizing signature. Then the auditor will start asking questions about the other 2 that did not have the authorizing signature. That is, so we can say the business is 80% compliant, 20% non-compliant, and we can start investigating what went wrong with the 20% non-compliance. That is frequency estimating sampling. All right, so you can see attribute sampling is directly linked to compliance testing. Then you have stop or go sampling. So stop or go sampling is used to stop the audit at the earliest possible time. Okay, so in this case too, we're still looking for an attribute. For example, I'm looking for, we want to do a review of the kind of viruses that we have within our network. So we have our systems, okay? Then we scan the first system and the antivirus says, right, this is negative. There's no virus on this system. So we go, right? Check the second one. There's no virus, we go. We check the third one, we scan the third one, there's a virus. So we stop, right? We stop there. So that means because of the attribute of that virus of that system, we have to stop. Maybe we write the MAC address or we write the IP address, right? Or the serial number of that machine. Write it down. That is our number 1 sample. Then we move to the 4th system and scan, no virus. 5th system and scan, no virus. 6th, there is a virus. Great, we stop there again, right? And write down the details of the system. So we keep on stopping and going until we have, right, just about enough sample to start the audit or the review of the investigation process. So that is stop or go sampling. Then we have discovery sampling. Discovery sampling basically is used to uncover fraud or irregularity. So we have 10 million transactions. Once you find one transaction that is fraudulent or irregular, you say, yes, there is fraud in this organization, there is irregularity in this organization. So that is basically discovery sampling used to uncover fraud or irregularity. All right. So if you have looked at all the examples of the attribute sampling, it's all concerned about compliance, whether there is an attribute present or absent. Okay, then we have variable sampling, the second approach. Okay, this to sampling. Okay, so we have the second method. Okay, the variable sampling. So the variable sampling is focused on monetary value or a measurable value. You want to determine whether the measure is valid or invalid. Height, weight, dollar amount. Right. So they use it for substantive testing. You can use it to confirm whether a balance is correct, whether a transaction is valid, correctly recorded, accurately recorded or not. So that is what variable sampling is used for. So we have 3 types of variable sampling. We have stratified mean per unit, we have unstratified mean per unit, we have difference estimation. Now, what is stratified mean per unit? Stratified mean per unit means the population is divided into strata, into classes. Then from each class you can pick your sample. So we have invoices. Maybe you want to audit invoices and you have perhaps you have 10,000 invoices in that organization in the year. You have 1,000. Right? How do you do the test for 1,000 invoices? Okay, and you have 3 weeks. So what do? You can break the invoice amount, right? Maybe on Excel or other software, right? Invoice amount of $1 to $10,000, 10,001 to 20,000, up to the last one, 40,001 to $50,000. Then of course we can now pick from each of the classes. So the idea here is that each of the stratum will be represented in the sample selection. right? If the auditor wants more, detailed work, more granular work, we can say, okay, instead of 1 to 10,000, let's do 1 to $5,000. Yeah, $5,001 to 10,000, $10,001 to 15,000. So instead of 50 invoices, you can have 100 invoices. So the idea is that you are able to actually be able to get sample from as many stratum as possible. So this is stratifying per unit. Divide the population, right, into classes, right, and pick from each of the class. Let me use a very layman example. All right, so you need 8 people from geology department of the university to go for an international conference. So how do we pick the sample? How do we pick 8 people out of maybe thousands or hundreds of students? You can break the geologist department into fraction of levels, 100 levels, 200 levels, 300 levels. So we can pick 2 people from each of the levels. Is that not wonderful? 2 people from 100 level, 2 people from 200, 2 people from 300, 2 people from 400. That's 8. But how do we get the 2? We can divide each of the level again into gender, male and female. So we pick one guy, we pick one lady, all right, from 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, 400 level. So we get 8, all right, based on gender, based on levels. That is transforming per unit. So everybody goes home happy, all right. Then we have on farming per unit. This is basically using average. Find the average of the population and use that to extrapolate over the entire population. You have 1,000 invoices, right? You have if you sum the invoices, you get what, $50 million. So you find the average of that average of the invoice amount. That will give you $5,000. So every invoice that is up to $5,000 and above is detailed, scrutinized, granularly scrutinized, all right, by the auditor. All right, so any invoice that falls below $5,000, all right, you can actually, unless you are, maybe you are put on inquiry, you may actually ignore them. All right, that is what is called materiality. So you have used basically on stratified mean per unit, finding the average to determine the materiality threshold. So for this particular scenario now, the auditor is going to focus on transactions from $5,000 and above. That is very scientific, right? That is a scientific way of picking your invoice, your sample size. Then you have difference estimation. Difference estimation basically is the difference between what we call book value and audited value. Book value is the value that the auditor supplied. The audited value is the value that the auditor finds. Ideally, they should be the same. If they are the same, then that means there's no issue of concern. But if they are not the same, then that means maybe we have to investigate further. All right, so look at this. Okay, so you have the auditor. The auditee gave you the book value, quantity is 20, unit price is 5, total price is 90. All right. Then the auditor got quantity is 20, unit price is 5, total price is 100. So there's a difference between audited value and book value. So you have to investigate what went wrong. Right? Is this auditor that was wrong or the auditor that was wrong? All right, that is why you have to investigate. This is difference estimation. You can see substantive testing. Can help people know whether values provided by the auditee is actually whether they are correct or not. Look at the second scenario. Book value, quantity is 40, unit price is 10. All right, book value of total price is 400. The audited value, quantity is 40, unit price is 10. The audited value is also 400. You can't bother yourself about this. Obviously, there's no audit issue here. All right, there's no difference in the two estimations. So for this, you just move on to the next transaction. But for this one, you have to investigate further because there's a variance between what the auditor got and what the auditee got. That is what is called difference estimation, and it can be used to select samples that require further review by the auditor. So there are some wonderful statistical sampling times you're supposed to be familiar with like confidence coefficient. It's also called reliability factor or confidence level. What is the level of confidence we should have on the sample? Now, the bigger your sample size, the more the confidence you are going to have that sample, the sampling exercise is going to be successful. So if we do 85% sampling, of course, our confidence is 85% or 0.85, which is very high. We do 100% sampling, which means we tested the entire population. Our confidence coefficient is 100% or 1. All right. So the opposite of confidence coefficient is the level of risk, right? So the level of risk is basically the sampling risk, right? You do 100% testing, the level of risk is 0, right? There's no sampling risk, all right? But you do 95% testing, the level of risk is 5%. You do 80% testing, the level of risk is 20%. You do 75% testing, the level of risk is 25%. All right, because once you don't do 100% testing, there's a risk that the parts you didn't test might be what might validate the whole audit procedure. So that is what is called the sampling risk, and that is very related to audit risk. So what you are looking for in the audit may actually be in the sample you didn't test. That is what is called the level of risk. The precision is set by the auditor. All right, it's basically, I call it P minus S, all right, the difference between the population and the sample, all right? So the population is 100%, the sample is 85%, and your precision is 15%, all right? So the difference between the acceptable range difference between the sample and the actual population, all right? I've talked about sampling risk already. So that's that about sampling. Let's look at the review questions. An IS auditor should use statistical sampling and not judgmental sampling when A, the probability of error must be objectively quantified, B, the auditor wishes to avoid sampling risk, C, generalized audit software is unavailable, D, the tolerable error rate cannot be determined. When should you use statistical sampling? Of course, because you use statistical sampling when you want objectivity. I've said that the meta sampling is very subjective. So the best answer is definitely A. All right, the next question says, which of the following sampling methods will be the most effective to determine whether purchase orders issued to vendors have been authorized as per the authorization matrix? So you can see that is compliance, right? Whether they are following orders, right, in the issuance of purchase orders, right? So that's compliance testing. And you know, compliance testing, right, is done using attribute sampling. I've talked about that. So it cannot be A, variable sampling, it cannot be B, stratified per unit. Stratified per unit is a type of variable sampling, right? It cannot be D, unstratified per unit, which is a type of variable sampling also. So the answer is definitely C, attribute sampling, right? I like this question. An IS auditor is determining the appropriate sample size for testing the effectiveness of change management process. No deviation was noted in last 2 years audit review. And management has assured no deviation in the process for the period under review. Auditor can adopt a dash A, higher confidence coefficient resulting in a smaller sample size. B, lower confidence coefficient resulting in higher sample size. C, lower confidence coefficient resulting in lower sample size. D, higher confidence coefficient resulting in a higher sample size. All right, so if you look at the item, the question details very well, you can see that it's a low risk environment, right? Compliance level is very high in that organization. In the past 2 years, everything has been okay, and it's like even the current audit, you know, the environment is still highly compliant. I remember we said we are auditing the compliance environment to lower your substantive testing. If you are lowering your substantive testing, it means you are going to lower the sample size. And if you lower the sample size, it means you have lowered the confidence coefficients. Wow. So the best answer is definitely C. Lower confidence coefficient resulting in a lower sample size? The answer is C. Right. Let's look at the next question. Major difference between compliance testing and substantive testing is that compliance testing tests A, details, while substantive testing tests controls. B, controls, while substantive testing tests details. C, financial statements, while substantive testing tests items in trial balance. D, internal requirements, while substantive testing tests internal controls. Before we said that internal compliance testing will test whether controls are working as defined, while substantive testing will test the details, the balances, the transaction. So the best answer here is definitely B. Okay, next question with regard to confidence correlation or confidence coefficient. It can be said that A, small sample size will give high confidence correlation. B, if an auditor knows internal controls are strong, the confidence coefficient may be lowered. C, small confidence correlation will result into high sample size. D, if an auditor knows internal controls are strong, the confidence coefficient may be increased. Of course, D is wrong, right? So if you are very confident about the environment, the compliance level is okay, you can reduce sample size, which means you can reduce confidence coefficient. So the answer is definitely B. All right, the next question. When an IS auditor performs a test to ensure that only active users have access to the system, only active users have access to the system. All right, the IS auditor is performing a dash, A, compliance test, B, substantive test, C, statistical sample, D, judgmental sampling. Definitely, this is a compliance test. We want to test whether only active users, right, are given access. So that means whether they are following policy in user registration and user deregistration. So the answer is definitely A, compliance test. So that is that for Cisa domain 1 part 3. I hope you have enjoyed the class. So I will be stopping here. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, kindly try to do so that you can be able to get notified when I drop other videos. Thank you.